Good evening, and welcome to Peaceful Bible Stories for Sleep. I'm so glad you've chosen to spend these quiet moments with us tonight. Find your most comfortable position and let your body begin to relax as we journey back nearly 3,000 years, construction projects in all of human history. Tonight, we are going to explore the building of Solomon's Temple in Jerusalem, a 7-year labor of love, devotion, and incredible craftsmanship. This isn't a story of battles or drama, but rather the gentle, methodical account of how God's people created a sacred space where heaven and earth could meet. But now, in this time of peace and prosperity, Solomon would fulfill his father's dream and create something permanent, something magnificent. Close your eyes if you'd like, and allow the ancient rhythms of construction, the careful placement of each stone, and the reverent work of thousands of craftsmen to carry you into restful sleep. The young king had inherited not only his father David Esdron to build a permanent house for the Lord God of Israel, but more than materials, Solomon needed people, stone cutters and carpenters, metal workers and artists, men who could take raw materials and transform them into something beautiful and holy. Let your breathing slow and deepen as we begin this peaceful journey together. These weren't slaves, but citizens, fulfilling their service to God and King. 10,000 would work in Lebanon at any given time, cutting and preparing the cedar logs, while 20,000 remained home with their families. They would rotate monthly, ensuring that no man was away from his home and livelihood for too long. Nothing was left to chance or personal preference. The length, the width, the height, the placement of every room and every furnishing, all had been ordained by God Himself. The first task was the most crucial, laying the foundation that would support the entire structure for generations to come. These massive stones had been quarried from the hills around Jerusalem and shaped with such precision that they fit together perfectly without mortars. Our story begins in the 4th year of King Solomon's reign over Israel, around 966 BC. Carefully quarrying and shaping each block that would form the temple's foundation and walls, and no hammer, chisel, or any other iron tool was heard at the temple site during construction. Can you imagine the planning required to achieve this? Every stone was cut to exact specifications at the quarry, then transported to the Temple Mount and fitted into place in perfect silence, 60 cubits long. Just as these ancient workers laid each stone with care and precision, so too can you lay your worries and concerns to rest tonight. Building a foundation of peace for tomorrow. It wasn't the largest building in the ancient world, but it would be the most beautiful, the most carefully crafted, the most sacred. The construction followed a pattern that had been used in the tabernacles centuries before, but now executed in permanent materials on a grand scale. Over the stone walls, a framework of cedar wood was constructed, magnificent beams from the forests of Lebanon, trees that had grown for centuries before, being selected for this sacred purpose. The cedar was prized not only for its beauty and durability, but for its wonderful fragrance, which would fill the temple with a sweet. Even though most of it would never be seen once the temple was complete, the stones were dressed. Even as they were being built, plans were being made for their decoration. The cedar would be carved with intricate patterns, gourds and open flowers, cherubim and palm trees, all symbols of life and growth and divine presence, and fitted with the same care that would be given to the most visible parts of the building. Day after day, the walls grew taller. The sound of wooden mallets on wooden wedges, the careful scraping of planes, smoothing rough surfaces, the quiet conversations of craftsmen solving problems and sharing techniques. This was work done for God's eyes. This wasn't a race. It was a pilgrimage in construction form. A journey toward completion that was as important as the destination itself. These beams spanned the width of the building, supported by the stone and cedar walls below. Each rafter was precisely cut, joining the main beams at exactly the right angle to shed water while providing maximum strength. The beams themselves were works of art, hewn from single trees and shaped with such skill that their surfaces were smooth as silk. But even this practical element was beautiful. The cedar planks were carefully selected for their grain and color, creating a ceiling that was as pleasing to look at as it was functional. And pulleys, with dozens of workers coordinating their efforts to position each piece exactly right. One mistake, one moment of inattention, and months of work could be damaged or destroyed. Mortars and tenon joints, carefully cut and fitted, held the massive timbers in place. These windows were wider on the inside than the outside, creating deep recesses that would be decorated with carved work and precious metals. The roof came together. These doors were hung on hinges of gold, and when they opened, they revealed the holy place in all its emerging glory. This phase of construction would require the most skilled artisans in the kingdom, men who could work with gold and precious stones, who could carve wood with the delicacy of jewelers. There's something deeply peaceful about the completion of each phase of construction. The sense of progress made and challenges overcome through patience and skill. Workers pausing to wipe sweat from their brows, stepping back to admire the day's progress, checking measurements one more time before the light faded. Imagine walking on floors of gold, your footsteps muffled by the precious metal, the entire space glowing with warm, reflected light. This perfect cube, 20 cubits in each dimension, was completely lined with cedar and then covered with pure gold. These weren't small decorative figures, but massive sculptures, each one 10 cubits tall, about 15 feet high. They were carved from olive wood, their wings spread wide, so that they touched each other in the center of the room and reached to the walls on either side. The Bible tells us that Solomon used 600 talents of gold for this room alone, roughly 22 tons of precious metal. There was satisfaction in this work. The artists who created them understood that they were making more than sculptures. They were creating guardians for the throne of God on earth. But these weren't plain boards. Between their wings, God himself would dwell, speaking to his people from the mercy seat atop the ark. Not gold paint or gold leaf, but solid gold, beaten, thin, and carefully fitted to every curve and detail of the carved work. Palm trees were carved into the walls, symbols of righteousness and prosperity. Open flowers bloomed in golden profusion, representing the beauty of God's creation. Workers would pause in their tasks to offer quiet prayers, overwhelmed by the beauty of what they were creating. The very act of building had become a form of worship. Even the doors between the holy place and the most holy place were works of art, carved with cherubim and palm trees, and overlaid with gold. The entire interior of the holy place gleamed like the inside of a jewel box. Yet, for all its richness, the overall effect wasn't overwhelming or gaudy. Instead, it was harmonious. Gourds and open flowers covered every surface, symbols of life and fertility and God's abundant provision. The carving was so detailed, the building was now weatherproof. That would make this temple truly magnificent. The interior ceiling would be covered with gold, transforming the practical cedar roof into something that gleamed like the heavens themselves. This gold work would come later, but even now, as the basic roof structure took shape, everyone involved could envision the final result. Like those patient craftsmen, you too can build something beautiful in your life. One day at a time, one careful decision at a time, with patience and dedication and trust in God's perfect timing. Each joint was a work of art in itself, invisible once complete, but essential to the structure's integrity, even incomplete. There was something holy about this place, something that set it apart from every other building project in the kingdom. These were carefully selected blocks, each one inspected for flaws, each one cut to precise dimensions. This was simply a matter of keeping out rain and sun. The roof of God's house needed to be as carefully crafted as every other element. The stones were laid in courses, row upon row, with each level perfectly aligned with those below and above. These men understood that they weren't just building another palace or fortress. They were creating a dwelling place for the Most High God. The main hall, called the Holy Place, would be 40 cubits long and 20 cubits wide. Beyond that, separated by a wall, 20 cubits in each dimension, where the Ark of the Covenant would rest. The Temple Mount was holy ground, and the actual construction would proceed in peaceful quiet. It was as if the very building process was a form of prayer, conducted in hushed tones appropriate for sacred space for generations, a tent that could be moved from place to place. The foundation would determine everything that came after. If it wasn't perfect, nothing built upon it could be perfect either. The work was slow, methodical, almost meditative. There was no rushing, no shortcut. Each day brought steady. The location had already been chosen by David. It was here, on this sacred hill, that Solomon would begin the most ambitious building project of the ancient world. Picture the careful drawing of plans on papyrus. Everything was done with patience, reverence, and attention to detail. Solomon sent messengers throughout his kingdom and beyond, gathering the finest materials and the most skilled craftsmen. Cedar wood would come from the forests of Lebanon, where King Hiram had already agreed to provide the magnificent trees that would form the temple's framework. But before a single stone could be laid, years of preparation were required. Gold would come from Ophir, silver from the royal treasuries, and bronze from the mines of the kingdom. The king conscripted 30,000 men from all the tribes of Israel. In addition to these workers, Solomon employed 70,000 men to carry burdens, the heavy stones, the massive timbers. 80,000 more worked as stonecutters in the hill country, carefully quarrying and shaping each block that would form the temple's foundation and walls. Over all these workers, Solomon appointed 3,300 foremen, skilled supervisors, who would ensure that every detail met the exacting standards required for God's house. These men understood that they weren't just building another palace or fortress. They were creating a dwelling place for the Most High God. The planning was meticulous. Every measurement had been given to David by divine inspiration, and David had passed these sacred blueprints to his son. Nothing was left to chance or personal preference. The length, the width, the height, the placement of every room and every furnishing, all had been ordained by God Himself. As you rest tonight, these massive stones have been quarried from the hills around Jerusalem and shaped with such precision that they fit together. Picture the careful drawing of plans on papyrus, the selection of each piece of wood, the testing of each stone. The Temple Mount was holy ground, without the harsh sounds of metal striking stone. The foundation would determine everything that came after. Nothing built upon it could be perfect either. It was as if the very building process, and no hammer, chisel, or any other iron tool was heard at the temple site during construction. 60 cubits long, 20 cubits wide, and 30 cubits high, roughly 90 feet long, 30 feet wide. It wasn't the largest building in the ancient world, but it would be the most beautiful, the most carefully crafted, the most sacred. Can you imagine the planning required to achieve this? The work was slow, methodical, almost meditative. There was no rushing. Just as these ancient workers laid each stone with care and precision, so too can you lay your worries and concerns to rest tonight, building a foundation of peace for tomorrow. Even though most of it would never be seen once the temple was complete, the stones were dressed and fitted with the same care that would be given to the most visible parts of the building. This was work done for God's eyes. Each day brought steady, measurable progress as the foundation took shape. Every stone was cut to exact specifications at the quarry. There was no hurry, no rushing. Everything was done with patience. The first task was the most crucial, laying the foundation that would support the entire structure for generations to come. The very act of preparation was itself a form of worship, a recognition that what they were about to undertake was sacred beyond measure. In the 4th year of Solomon's reign, in the month of Ziv, which we would call April or May, the actual construction began. The foundation stones were enormous, carefully cut blocks of the finest limestone, some measuring 10 cubits long and 8 cubits wide, roughly 15 feet by 12 feet. The Bible tells us something remarkable about this construction. When the temple was built, only blocks dressed at the quarry were used. This wasn't just about noise control, it was about reverence. The foundation work took months. Each stone had to be positioned exactly right, checked. Picture the workers in the early morning light, carefully lowering each massive stone into place with ropes and wooden levers. The foundation wasn't just functional, it was beautiful. As the foundation neared completion, the outline of the temple became visible for the first time. Let your mind rest on this image of the foundation. With the foundation complete, The walls began to rise from the earth, like a prayer made manifest in stone and wood. The construction followed a pattern that had been used in the tabernacle centuries before, but now executed in permanent materials on a grand scale. The walls were built of stone. These were carefully selected blocks, each one inspected for flaws, each one cut to precise dimensions, mortise and tenon joints. Each joint was a work of art in itself, invisible once complete, but essential to the structure's integrity. Over the stone walls, a framework of cedar wood was constructed, trees that had grown for centuries before being selected for this sacred purpose. The cedar was prized not only for its beauty and durability, but for its wonderful fragrance, which would fill the temple with a sweet. This wasn't a race. It was a pilgrimage in construction form, a journey toward completion that was as important as the destination itself. The main hall, called the holy place, even incomplete, there was something holy about this place, something that set it apart from every other building project in the kingdom. Workers pausing to wipe sweat from their brows, stepping back to admire the day's progress, checking measurements. One more time before the light faded. Like those patient craftsmen, you too can build something beautiful in your life, one day at a time, with patience and dedication and trust in God's perfect timing. There was satisfaction in this work, a deep contentment that came from participating in something greater than themselves. The sound of wooden mallets on wooden wedges, the careful scraping of planes, smoothing rough surfaces, the quiet conversations of craftsmen solving problems and sharing techniques. Even as they were being built, the cedar wood would be carved with intricate patterns, gourds and open flowers, cherubim and palm trees, all symbols of life and growth and divine presence. Beyond that, separated by a wall 20 cubits in each dimension, the stones were laid in courses, row upon row, with each level perfectly aligned with those below and above. But stone alone would not be sufficient for God's house. The cedar beams were joined with incredible skill, using traditional woodworking techniques that required no nails or metal fasteners. As the walls rose higher, the building began to take on its distinctive shape. The walls weren't simply functional barriers, they were canvases for artistic expression. But that artistic work would come later. For now, the focus was on the steady, patient work of construction. Day after day, the walls grew taller. The workers developed a rhythm. Picture the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across the construction site. As night fell, the workers would return to their homes, but the partially completed walls would remain, standing silent guard over the sacred space. Let the steady rhythm of this ancient construction work calm your mind. Tonight, as the walls reached their full height, attention turned to one of the most challenging aspects of the construction: creating a roof worthy of the structure below. This was simply a matter of keeping out rain and sun. The roof of God's house needed to be as carefully crafted as every other element. The roof structure began with massive cedar beams, each one carefully selected for strength and beauty. These beams spanned the width of the building, supported by the stone and cedar walls below. But even this practical element was beautiful. The cedar planks were carefully selected for their grain and color, creating a ceiling that was as pleasing to look at as it was functional. Each rafter was precisely cut and fitted, joining the main beams at exactly the right angle to shed water while providing maximum strength. The beams themselves were works of art. The roof came together piece by piece, beam by beam, until the entire structure was enclosed and protected from the elements. The building was now weatherproof, creating a controlled environment where the finest craftsmen could work on the details that would make this temple truly magnificent. Above the main beams, these windows were wider on the inside than the outside. The roofing itself was made of cedar planks, thick boards that were fitted together so tightly that no rain could penetrate. These doors were hung on hinges of gold, and when they opened, they revealed the holy place in all its emerging glory. And pulleys, with dozens of workers coordinating their efforts. There's something deeply peaceful about the completion of each phase of construction. The sense of progress made and challenges overcome through patience and skill. One mistake, one moment of inattention, and months of work could be damaged or destroyed. But Solomon's vision went beyond mere function and beauty. The interior ceiling would be covered with gold, transforming the practical cedar roof into something that gleamed like the heavens themselves. This gold work would come later, but even now, as the basic roof structure took shape, everyone involved could envision the final result. The construction of the roof required incredible coordination. The massive beams had to be lifted into place using ropes. The workers had been chosen for their skill and experience, and they approached each task with the reverence it deserved. With the roof complete, work could begin on the interior divisions and the more delicate aspects of construction. Windows were cut into the walls, not large openings, but carefully designed apertures that would let in just the right amount of light. The entrance to the temple was particularly impressive. Double doors of olive wood, each door carved with cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers, then overlaid with gold. As you rest tonight, imagine the satisfaction of those ancient craftsmen as they saw the roof completed, the building enclosed, with the basic structure complete. The most intricate and beautiful work could begin, transforming the interior of the temple into a space worthy of God's presence. This phase of construction would require the most skilled artisans in the kingdom, men who could work with gold and precious stones, who could carve wood with the delicacy of jewelers. The walls of the holy place were lined with cedar boards from floor to ceiling, but these weren't plain boards. Each one was carved with intricate designs, not gold paint or gold leaf, but solid gold, beaten thin and carefully fitted to every curve and detail of the carved work. The entire interior of the holy place gleamed like the inside of a jewel box. These weren't small decorative figures. Between their wings, God Himself would dwell, speaking to His people from the mercy seat atop the ark. Understood that they were making more than sculptures. They were creating guardians for the throne of God on earth. Palm trees were carved into the walls. Open flowers bloomed in golden profusion, representing the beauty of God's creation. Workers would pause in their tasks. Picture the warm glow of reflected light, the intricate carvings that spoke of God's attention to detail, the sense of being surrounded by beauty and holiness in this sacred space. Every element worked together to create an atmosphere of peace and reverence. The very act of building had become a form of worship. Even the doors between the holy place and the most holy place were works of art, carved with cherubim and palm trees and overlaid with gold. They were carved from olive wood, their wings spread wide, yet, for all its richness, the overall effect wasn't overwhelming or gaudy. Instead, it was harmonious, peaceful, a space that invited worship and contemplation. Gourds and open flowers covered every surface, symbols of life and fertility and God's abundant provision. Imagine walking on floors of gold, the entire space glowing with warm, reflected light. The carving was so detailed, so lifelike, that visitors would later say, the flowers seemed ready to bloom, and the gourds ready to be harvested. This perfect cube, 20 cubits in each dimension, was completely lined with cedar and then covered with pure gold. The Bible tells us that Solomon used 600 talents of gold for this room alone. But even this magnificent carving was only the beginning. Over the carved cedar, the floor was made of cypress wood, but like everything else, the most holy place. But the crowning glory of the most holy place was the pair of cherubim. The cherubim stood guard over the place where the ark would rest, their faces turned toward each other, their wings creating a canopy of protection over the most sacred object in Israel. The work on these cherubim alone took months to complete. Each feather had to be carved individually, each facial feature shaped with loving care. Throughout the interior, every surface that could be decorated was decorated. The attention to detail was extraordinary. No corner was left unfinished. As the interior work neared completion, let the image of this golden interior. As the 7th year of construction began, attention turned to creating the furnishings that would make the temple functional for worship. These weren't merely practical items, but sacred vessels and furniture, each one designed according to divine specifications and crafted with the same care as the building itself. The most important piece was the altar of incense, placed in the holy place, directly in front of the entrance to the most holy place. Even this functional piece was a work of art, beautiful to look at and meaningful in every detail. The golden surface would reflect the light of the lamps, creating a warm glow that filled the holy place with gentle illumination. This altar was made of cedar wood and overlaid with pure gold, standing about 3 feet high and 18 inches square. Here, creating a fragrant cloud that would rise toward heaven as a symbol of the prayers of God's people. Even though this table would remain in the temple permanently, it was designed to be portable, a reminder of the years when God's people wandered in the wilderness. Each piece was perfectly proportioned, beautifully decorated, and made with the finest materials available. This massive structure was 30 feet square and 15 feet high. King David had captured vast quantities of bronze from his enemies in battle, and this metal, swords, had literally been beaten into altar implements. Visitors approaching the temple would pass between these bronze sentinels, reminded that they were entering a place established by God's power and maintained by His faithfulness. The altar was made of bronze-covered wood, with a bronze grating inside where the fire would burn, and the entire structure was perfectly balanced on its bronze supports. Each laver stood on a wheeled bronze cart. These carts could be moved as needed. Each piece was a prayer made manifest in metal and wood. a tangible expression of devotion and skill offered to the God who had given them their abilities. The rim was decorated with gourds cast in relief, and the whole piece gleamed like a bronze mirror in the sunlight, the careful polishing of bronze until it gleamed like gold. The final adjustments to ensure perfect balance and proportion. The moment when each item was declared complete and ready for sacred use. The craftsmanship was so fine that each petal seemed ready to flutter in an unfelt breeze. Made of acacia wood and overlaid with pure gold, it stood in the holy place as a constant reminder of God's provision. These weren't just beautiful objects. They were tools for worship, means by which God's people could approach Him in reverence. He was particularly skilled in bronze casting, and He created 2 massive bronze pillars that stood at the entrance to the temple. Each pillar was 27 feet tall and 18 feet in circumference, topped with elaborate capitals. This enormous vessel rested on the backs of 12 bronze oxen, 3 facing each direction, and was used by the priests for ceremonial washing. 12 loaves of bread would always rest on this table, replaced fresh each Sabbath by the priests. These lamps would burn continuously, their light never allowed to go out, symbolizing God's eternal presence with His people. The altar was carved with the same motifs found throughout the temple: cherubim, palm trees, and open flowers. 10 golden lampstands were placed throughout the holy place. These weren't simple oil lamps, but elaborate works of art, each one crafted from a single talent of pure gold, about 75 pounds of precious metal. The lampstands were modeled after the original menorah from the tabernacle. Each lampstand had 7 branches, decorated with almond blossoms, buds, and flowers beaten out of the gold itself. The table for the bread of the presence was another masterpiece of sacred furniture. The table itself was surrounded by a golden crown or border, and golden rings were attached to its corners, so that golden poles could be inserted for carrying. Golden dishes and bowls were crafted to accompany the table vessels, for the bread and for the wine that would be poured out as an offering. But perhaps the most impressive furnishing was the great bronze altar that stood in the courtyard. The bronze for this altar, and for many other temple furnishings, came from a remarkable source: Hiram, the master craftsman from Tyre. These pillars, named Yakin and Boaz, weren't structural. They were symbolic, representing God's strength and stability. The bronze work also included a remarkable piece called the Sea, 11,000 gallons of water. The bronze was cast in one piece, with walls about 3 inches thick, smaller bronze basins called lavers. As each piece of furniture was completed and put in place, the temple came closer to its intended purpose. The craftsmen who made these furnishings. Picture the quiet satisfaction of these ancient artisans as they put the finishing touches on each piece. As the 7th year of construction drew to a close, the great work was finally complete. Every stone had been set, every beam positioned, every surface decorated, every furnishing crafted and installed. The golden chains that would hold back the veil before the most holy place, the golden nails and hinges were polished until they gleamed. Now, in a solemn procession, the priests carried it through the streets of Jerusalem and up to the Temple Mount. The entire city turned out to watch, as the most sacred object in Israel, made its final journey. Every surface was cleaned and prepared for the dedication ceremony that would mark the temple's official opening. They had to withdraw from the holy place, overcome by the presence of the Almighty. Standing before the completed temple, seeing the cloud of God's glory filling the space, he offered a prayer of dedication that captured the wonder and humility appropriate to the occasion. The temple had become what it was always meant to be, not just a beautiful building, but the dwelling place of God on earth. The heavens, even the highest heaven, how much less this temple I have built. Yet even as he acknowledged the impossibility of containing the infinite God in any earthly structure, Solomon recognized that God had chosen to make this place special, to meet with his people here in a unique way. The temple that had existed in David's heart and Solomon's plans now stood in magnificent reality. The smoke of the offerings rose continuously toward heaven. Generations of priests would serve at its altars, countless worshippers would come to pray within its walls, and the presence of God would continue to dwell in the most holy place. Here was the King of Israel, the most powerful man in the known world, humbling himself before the God who had made all things possible. Musicians played harps and lyres and cymbals, while choirs sang praises to the God who had brought his people to this moment of fulfillment. Like those ancient builders, you too are part of God's ongoing construction project. Not a building made of stone and wood, but a spiritual temple made of living stones, each person who follows him adding their own unique contribution to the whole. This was simply a matter of moving furniture. It was the moment when God himself would take up residence in the house that had been built for him. Slowly, carefully, with infinite patience and love, he shapes us into something beautiful, something worthy of his presence. They had witnessed something unprecedented. The completion of God's house, the establishment of a permanent place where he would dwell among his people. The final weeks were spent on the countless small details that transform a building into a sacred space. Made of acacia wood and overlaid with gold, it contained the stone tablets of the 10 Commandments, a pot of manna from the wilderness years. The Bible tells us that when they set the ark in its place beneath the wings of the great cherubim, the temple wasn't meant to be a monument to human achievement, but a place where heaven and earth could meet, where finite humans could approach the infinite God. A cloud filled the temple, the visible manifestation of God. Above the ark was the mercy seat, a golden cover with 2 golden cherubim whose wings overshadowed the place where God's presence would dwell. But before any public ceremony could take place, crucial task, bringing the Ark of the Covenant from its temporary resting place to its permanent home in the most holy place. The Ark had been resting in a tent on Mount Zion, where David had placed it years before. The Ark itself was ancient, dating back to the time of Moses. As the priests carried the Ark into the temple, through the holy place and into the most holy place, something extraordinary happened. The cloud was so thick, so overwhelming, that the priests couldn't continue their service. Solomon himself was overwhelmed by this moment. But will God really dwell on earth? Solomon asked. The dedication ceremony lasted for 7 days, with thousands of sacrifices offered on the great bronze altar. But perhaps the most moving moment came when Solomon knelt before the altar in full view of all the people and spread out his hands. In his prayer, Solomon asked that God would hear the prayers offered in this temple, that he would forgive the sins of his people, that he would bless those who came here seeking his face. As the 7 days of dedication came to an end, the people returned to their homes with hearts full of joy and wonder. The temple would stand for nearly 400 years, but even more than its historical significance. The temple represented something eternal, God's desire to dwell with his people, to be accessible to those who seek him, to transform ordinary materials into something sacred through his presence. As you rest tonight, the 7 years of patient work, the cooperation of thousands of skilled craftsmen. As our journey through the construction of Solomon's temple comes to an end, let your mind rest on the deeper truths this ancient story reveals. The temple that took 7 years to build was magnificent beyond description, but it was only a shadow of something even greater. The New Testament tells us that we ourselves are now God's temple, that his Spirit dwells within each person who believes in him. The careful craftsmanship that went into every stone and beam of Solomon's temple is the same attention God gives to shaping our character, our hearts, our lives. Just as those ancient workers labored patiently, day after day, year after year, so God works in us with infinite patience. Every experience, every moment of growth is like another stone, being carefully fitted into place. The intricate carvings speak of the unique details of our individual personalities and gifts. The precious furnishings remind us that we are equipped for sacred purposes, called to be vessels of honor in God's service. The gold that covered the temple-less interior represents the purity and beauty that God creates in us over time, a living stone in his spiritual temple. And just as the temple was filled with God's glory, so our lives can be filled with his presence as we yield ourselves to his patient work of construction and decoration. The 7 years of building remind us he doesn't cut corners or skip step. His temple, his dwelling place. Let the peace of that truth settle over you like a warm blanket. You are loved, you are chosen, you are being carefully crafted by the master builder himself. Every detail matters to him. Every aspect of who we are is precious in his sight. He is building something eternal. All is complete. All is at rest. All is peaceful in the house of the Lord. As you drift off to sleep tonight, rest in the knowledge that you are God's workmanship. The sounds of ancient construction fade into silence. Now, the careful placement of stones, the smooth strokes of planes on cedar wood, the gentle tapping of gold being fitted into place. Sleep well, knowing that you too are part of God's eternal building project. Sweet dreams, and may the peace of God's presence fill your rest tonight and always.